Hi, my name is Stacy Murray. I'm here to share my story of my childhood traumas that I've experienced, molestation through family members, some domestic violence as a teenager, some history of abuse, and just some of the things that happened due to childhood trauma. My mother and my father were married, and she left my father and left Georgia and moved to Florida when she was 6 months pregnant with me. She had the full responsibility of raising 6 children as a single parent mother. Around the age of first grade, I was enrolled in Catholic private school. My older sisters and brothers were in public school, so I would get out of school a lot earlier in the day than they would. My mom would be working, of course, so she would either pick me up from school or have someone to pick me up and drop me off at my aunt's house. My aunt wasn't really the one that was babysitting me. It was an older cousin who was an adult at that time. That is where it all started. It started out with just, touching here and there. It would be if you tell your mom I'm doing this, I'm going to tell her that you've done something you weren't supposed to do and I just spank you and you got mad with me and you're lying on me. But the very first time that the touching happened, I can remember I just ran out the door and I ran home to where we were living, which was probably about, I would say, a couple miles probably from my aunt's home. And I ran to the house. I don't remember how I got in the home, but I did. I went inside and I remember getting in the closet and just sitting there. And I stayed there until my mom came home. And I assumed she had gone by to pick me up and I wasn't there. And so she came home looking for me. To this day, she never asked me what happened or why did I leave. So I'm not sure if my cousin told her that something happened and I got mad and I left or what happened, but I can't remember her asking me, why did you leave? I left shoes, my book bag, everything, and I just ran home. And so it just continued. I would still get dropped off there after school. It bothered me so that no one ever asked me, why are you running away from there? What are you doing? I mean, what's the problem? There was an incident at one time where he was holding me down, and he was a very big guy. And of course, like I said, I was kindergarten, first, second grade. And it was almost to a point where, I was about to be violated and the doorbell rang. And I remember, and I always think, the insurance man, God's got that ram in the bush, but the insurance man, he rang the doorbell, was knocking on the door, and he would not leave. And it was just, I know it was by God's grace that he didn't leave. And so my cousin, he let me go, and as he went to the door, I ran out of the back door. And I didn't go home that day because at that point I knew I just felt so unsafe that I needed to go where someone was that I felt safe with. And I ran from my aunt's home and I went all the way to my brother and sister's school. There again, I had no shoes on. I ran until I got there. I've spoken with them since that incident, and they remember that day. They never asked why. They just walked me home. But I later found out that my sister was also being molested by family members, and I believe she knew what was going on, but she was a child as well and couldn't, what would she do and what could she do at that point? Those incidents happened over and over. And for my cousin, there were uncles that never actually penetrated, but there were fondling and touching and things that happened from uncles on my mom's side of the family. To me, I guess the trauma came from not just the fact that the incidents were happening, but the fact that I was running, but did I ever find that safe haven? I can remember when I first started going to my aunt's house and my cousin was babysitting me. It started with just snacks and games and, okay, big brother, we're having fun, to the tickling and the touching, and then it became inappropriate touching. And when I say inappropriate, because it felt uncomfortable, and I knew that wasn't right. But I have to go back and say that it felt uncomfortable, but also as a child, I didn't know the touch of my father, of a man. So I thought that was love initially, that my big brother's taking care of me. He's the man that's here, that's taking on that role right now of taking care of me when my mom's away. So initially, of course, I may have, wanted those touches because I thought that was love. But when it became to a point where I'm like, this doesn't feel right. This can't be right. If you say anything, I'm going to say that, you've done something that you weren't supposed to do, and I just chastise you. I'm not going to give you the snacks. I'm not going to, take care of you when your mom comes. I'm just not going to do anything for you. But if you don't allow this to happen, or if you run away or say something to your mom, I'm going to tell her that you were bad. There were also incidents where he would have his friends in the home. Same thing. They would, play games, and they both would be touching me. It was very scary to still see his face today, still see the friend's face today, when those incidents were happening. Incidents that happened didn't all happen from my cousins. I can remember as I got older, he didn't babysit me anymore. At this time, I started staying home. This had to be around 9 or 10. At home, I slept in the bed with my mom because, of course, there was 6 children, so you had to share beds. But I shared a bed with my mom, but she went to visit a boyfriend, and I went with her. I was in the bed with both of them, and I remember her getting out of the bed and leaving me in the bed with the boyfriend. He fondled me at that time. And I can remember, I know that I tried to block out what he did to me, but the part that sticks out to me the most is that though I was up against the wall, and I can remember seeing the curtains. I can still see the curtains. It's like a flowery curtain, and it's almost like the window must have been open because I can see the curtains moving. But the coldness of that wall that I was laying on, I remember that more so even than his touch. And I know that I've probably tried to block that out, but that coldness of that wall and that curtain just flowing, I can still see that today. And just, and there again, it was just the thought of you not protecting me. My mom was doing what she had to take care of me. She had to play both roles. My dad wasn't there to protect, but she was there and didn't protect. And so it's been an issue for me. And that is part of what my healing process has been, is being able to forgive both of my parents for not protecting their child. Say around 9 or 10. And I was, like, okay, there again, longing for that fatherly love and that protection, because I thought, okay, if I go to Georgia, these things in Florida are not going to be happening to me because my dad's going to protect me. I asked if I could go to school in Georgia. An incident that I want to share is that my step-grandmother, my stepsister, and I had gone to the beauty shop. We'd gone to get our hair washed and curled, and my stepmom came to pick us up because my grandmother didn't drive. And she came in, and when she came into the shop, she was just crying, and she was just like, y'all just come on. So we went out, and we got in the car. And when we got in the car, my dad was driving. She got in the front seat, and we got in the back. And when I looked to the front seat, my dad had a gun, and he had the gun sitting on the console, and he picked it up, and he was just holding it like towards my stepmom. And she was just screaming and crying, and he drove us back to my grandmother's house, we called her Big Ma, to my grandmother's house, and they got out of the car, and I was like, I'm getting out with them, because I'm like, I'm going from one type of abuse to another. I'm like, I thought I was coming to Georgia and I was going to be safe. I attempted to get out of the car with them. He told me that I couldn't get out of the car, that he was my child and not theirs. And and at this age, I went back and forth with him, like, you're crazy. I'm not going with you. And so I jumped out of the car and ran in the house with them. And probably a couple of days later, my stepmom went back home with my dad, and so my stepsister and I, we went back home too. And so this was just kind of like a vicious cycle, that they would fight and argue, and he would abuse her. So this went on for several months, the first couple months of school year. So when my mom called to check on me, I told her that I wanted to go back home. So I did move back home. I did not finish the school year out. So at this point in time, I'm thinking, so I'm safe nowhere. I'm not safe with my mom, and I'm not safe with my dad. So, I guess I was trying to decide the lesser of the two evils. Neither one of them was good, but I decided that I wanted to move back to Florida with my mom and my sisters and brothers. So I moved back to Florida with my mom and my older siblings, and we were there until the age of 16. My grandmother, who lived in Georgia, my mom's mom, needed care. So my mom decided that we would move moved to Georgia to take care of my grandmother. Still seeking that love, not really knowing what real love is, not really understanding, how a man is supposed to love a woman, because I've never had, the only male touch I had, any type of affection, was molestation. I met a guy in 11th grade who I thought, loved me because he said so. A couple months after high school, I got pregnant with my oldest child. By this time, this guy, we had several fights. And when I say, people look at domestic violence and say, okay, the person is just, beating up on the person. I'm a fighter. And as you can tell, I ran when I was young. I would run. I'm a fighter. So we had knockdown, drag out fights. I would fight back, but yet and still it was a constant needing to fight. I was pregnant with my son, probably, I would say about 4 or 5 months pregnant with him. This guy he dropped out of high school. We were to graduate the same year, but he didn't graduate. He dropped out, started using, and he was in and out of jail. And, I loved him and I wanted to be with him. He introduced to me while I was pregnant with his child. Basically, he was saying, this is what I'm doing, and if you want to be with me, let's I want to introduce you to what I'm doing, because he loved me. So I tried it. I can honestly say that by the grace of God that I did not become a, because I've seen so many people who, once they tried, that it just it became an addiction immediately. It was the absolute worst feeling, the worst taste, the worst thing that I have ever put up to my mouth. I didn't know what love was, and I didn't love myself. And so there were, many incidences where take our money that we were supposed to pay bills with, and I would wake up and we would have nothing, have to borrow money from family to get, the bills paid, and just like the constant abuse, him not working, him in and out of jail, and I would wait for him, and I constantly, I would leave, and he would say what he felt like I needed to hear, that I thought was love, and I would go back. I would constantly go back. And after my son was born, I had actually stopped seeing him for a couple of months. And I thought I had, I've broken free. And a friend and I had decided, it's time for me to go out and just get out of the house. I was getting ready to get dressed to go out one night, and there was a knock on the door. I assumed it was my friend who was coming, because I was always late, and I just assumed that she was coming to, make sure that I was getting dressed and that I wouldn't back out, probably what she was expecting me to do. And when I opened the door, it was my ex, and he was standing there, and I know he had the time, that look that he had in his eyes whenever he was using the, he pushed his way in the door and immediately went into the kitchen and grabbed a knife out of the butcher block and snatched the phone cord out of the wall. And I'm thinking it's because he doesn't, want me to call anyone. And this is before cell phone time. He grabbed me and tied me with the telephone cord. I didn't have any clothes on because I was about to get into the bathtub. And so he, had the knife against me and pushed me toward the bedroom and put me on the bed, and then he proceeded to continue to tie me up. And throughout the night, he constantly beat me. He raped me several times throughout the night, and to a point where I was just like, just kill me. Early that morning, I heard the lawnmower out by my window. And so in my mind, I'm going, okay, this is how I can get away. So I told him that I needed to use the bathroom. He let me up to go to the bathroom. And when he did, I bolted, there again, that running, I bolted to the living room and just pushed the window open and just started screaming, help. Like I said, I didn't know if he was gonna come behind me and stab me with the knife or what he was gonna do, but at that point, I was just like, if he kills me, he just kills me, but I've had enough. And so when I yelled help, he heard me, even though he was on the lawnmower with all the noise. He heard me, and he jumped off the lawnmower, and he saw the guy jump off the lawnmower, because by that time he was behind me at the window. And he didn't try to stab me. He threw the knife down and he ran out of the door. And I guess the guy, when he jumped off the lawnmower, he went and called the police, because the police caught him at the end of the road where my apartment was. He went to jail, but they did not keep him there. The charges were dropped. Shortly thereafter that happened, I got my son and we moved to New York. I was going to, try to get away from him by any means necessary. And because at this point, I'm like, okay, he's going to kill me. I was on the front page of the newspaper in our city of a woman held captive overnight, by an estranged boyfriend. I was in New York. So you would think, okay, she's free now. She's gotten away from him. Well, lo and behold, in New York, he had no idea where I was. Here I am. I wrote him a letter. It was me asking for this abuse again, because this is all I know. I wrote him a letter, and that's the conversation started. He wrote back, and I gave him the number. He called, and so 6 months later, I came back to Georgia. You would have thought that was enough, but it wasn't. I ended up getting pregnant with my daughter, and this is how I believe I was able to break free from that stronghold of him. Once my daughter was born, all I could see in her was me. And I thought, I cannot, as a mother, see my daughter going through all of the same things that I went through. I have to break it now, because if I don't, she's going to end up in the same shape that I was in. And that is how I ended the relationship with him. I stayed with him on and off for about a year after she was born. And I thought about the trauma and the abuse that I had, and I said, I have to protect her. If I don't love myself enough, I have to love this daughter who's going to see me and be me if I don't break the stronghold now. I went back to school. I had graduated, but I decided that I was going to go back to school. And as I started taking courses, I started believing in myself. I started believing that, okay, I can do this. I don't need him. I can love myself enough to do for me and take care of me and my children. I started out at the vocational school. I got a secretarial type certificate. I'd have to give credit to God, because secretary is definitely not what I would want it to be, but he put me in the place to get into the steps of beginning to grow and love myself. I started out in a home health agency as a secretary. And as I was, working with the nurses and the CNAs in the home health agency and just speaking with them, I started getting an interest in the medical field. And so I decided I was going to go back to school again. And I started out I said, I want to be a nurse. I went to school and ended up with a psychology degree, because once I started classes, I thought I need to be able to help someone who's gone through what I've gone through. And I did social work for quite a while. I have a master's degree, and I'm a registered nurse, and I also do social service type work to help others. So it was just the steps of that first day, starting at vocational school and saying, I can do this. Although he's telling me nobody would want me, nobody loves me, he's the only one that cares for me. Me thinking that my mother didn't care enough to protect me, my father didn't love me. But once I started, loving myself, I was able to break free from those strongholds and just to continue to press and move forward, to be what I was meant to be. I've learned, as far as healing, that forgiveness is number one. And the forgiveness, you're thinking, I can't forgive them for, what they did to me. I can't forgive them for not protecting me. I can't forgive them for the abuse, but it's not for them. The forgiveness has been for me. I've been able to set them free, and in that aspect, it has set me free, because I have learned that hurt people. And so each one of those people who played a part in my trauma and in my abuse, I can look back and see that they were hurting as well. And so I had to forgive them so that I could forgive myself, because I was holding things against myself too, especially with the domestic abuse, because I stayed in that relationship so long that that's what I knew and what I thought I was. And then I had to forgive myself for allowing it to go on. All of that happened for a reason. And if it wasn't just for me, I went through a lot of that to help others, because there's so many who are going through or have gone through the things that I've gone through. And that's how and why I ended up writing a book of my memoir called Fatherless Child, and became the CEO of OMG Ministries, and it's Only My God Ministries. And that is what we do, is we're helping, and not just women, because some men have been abused as well, but helping people to see their self-worth and to be able to forgive, and let things go so that they can grow into the path that they were set in life, and just to have that peace, because when you're holding in things and holding in that hatred and unforgiveness, and you're bound, and you're not at peace. You're holding them hostage, and you're still holding yourself hostage, and you're just bound. And that freedom is just, it's amazing. It's truly amazing to be free and to allow others to be free and to grow, and just to be able to share the things that I went through. And if it could help one person to realize that what you've gone through is not you. It doesn't identify you. It doesn't, you're not held down to it, because you're free. You've already, Jesus Christ paid that price, the ultimate price, and he's already paid that price for you to be free. We just have to embrace it. I'm actually taking medication for depression. I have a diagnosis of PTSD, depression and anxiety, but it doesn't define me. But I have attempted suicide. So, I just can't go back to that. I just recently got my mother and my siblings together and just said, okay, look, we're covering up these strongholds that have happened in our life, and we got to let it out. I started out by, telling her that I forgive her, and I know that she loved me the only way she knew how to love. Even though she didn't protect me, I don't know if she knew how. I don't know if she knew how to love. And so I told her that I wanted her to forgive herself for things that happened to me and happened to my siblings. And it was a very, very good intervention for my family when we did that. When you think about the trauma that you've gone through and the things that you've gone through, be mindful of how you interact and respond with your children, because that's where those strongholds will continue on, because you're pouring that same behavior into them, and it just continues on. My oldest brother passed away. After the funeral, my siblings and I were just sitting around talking. That is when we all realized that we all had been molested. We had no idea that the other one had gone through some of the same things. We finally told my mom, at that point, and we were, I was 22, so they all were 30 or what have you, and the only thing she said to us was, "Why didn't y'all tell me?" So it still puts the back on us. I want to share with especially single parents. You're hurting, and I know that you want to take care of your children. I know you love your child. I just plead with you to spend time with your children, listen to them, so that you can recognize when something is off with that child. Pay attention to your children and just listen to them. And there will be signs. Me as a younger child, I was very overweight. I covered it up with food. Those were things that if you see your child kind of staying to themselves and they just want to eat, and there's something going on. Just pay attention to that child. Listen to that child. And if they tell you something about someone, please don't brush it off. Please, even if you don't think that it's true, check into it. If you tell that child that they're lying or something didn't happen, or if that adult comes to you and you believe that adult over that child, they're going to shut down. And for the woman who is experiencing domestic violence or experiencing that past hurt, I plead with you to forgive yourself. And in order for you to forgive yourself, you're going to have to forgive that person who abused you, who molested you, because that hurt that you're holding in is going to continue to grow. It's going to fester, and it's going to come out somewhere and somehow. Just let it go, and that way that you can grow. And if you don't forgive that person, then you won't be free. And I know it will be hard to forgive them, because I've been there, done that. But you just trust God, because everything happens for a reason, and God knows what's happening. And I know it's hard, and I've said, what kind of God would allow all these things to happen to me? Did he really love me? Yes, he does. And the reason that, I've seen now that those things happen, and it wasn't just for me, it's for someone else. Those things happen so that I could share my story and help someone else. Little things at a time to make yourself feel worthy, to know that you are enough. by yourself. You don't need that person to validate who you are. I urge you just to realize that you are enough. One thing that helped me to heal was writing my memoir in a book, Fatherless Child. In that book, it tells you, although those things happened, each time I could go back and look and see how God's hand was in those situations. And after, like I said earlier, after I finally decided that I was enough and that I could break free from that domestic relationship, I was blessed with a very awesome husband. He's been right there and has encouraged me along the way to get all those things, get all that. And in writing that book, it helped me to heal as well, because I was able to get all of that out, just the things that I hadn't told anyone. And I've had so many people who come back and said, after I read your book, it helped me to get past a lot of the things that I was dealing with, that I was holding in and I hadn't told anyone. I've had so many people come and give their testimony to me, because they look at me and say, I can't believe you went through all of that. But I'm just thankful that I don't look like what I went through. But after Fatherless Child, I also wrote a book, Remove Your Mask and Embrace Your Scars. That is where I'm saying the forgiveness comes in. We all have scars and we just hide them, we cover them up and just put that mask on and go about our daily way. But we have to take that mask off and face those traumas and those scars so that we can heal. Currently in the process of writing another book, Breaking Generational Curses. And I also have started an anthology for those who want to write their story but don't know how, or don't want to write a full book. They're just giving me their stories, and I'm putting them all into an anthology, and giving that back to them so that they can have that freedom from telling their story.